Did the president go too far in referring to these players as SOBs who should be fired?
I think that it's always appropriate for the President of the United States to defend our flag, to defend the national anthem, and to defend the men and women who fought and died to defend it. Peter.
Sarah, let me ask you, you've often talked about how the president uses Twitter as a platform to sort of emphasize those things that are most important. Over the course of the last 72 hours, the president has tweeted more than a dozen times about sports, about kneeling, about NASCAR on this topic. He tweeted 0 times about Puerto Rico. So I guess the bottom line question is, what message is the president sending by emphasizing sports right now and not a big crisis that's affecting so many?
He's not emphasizing sports. You're missing the entire purpose of the message. He's emphasizing something that should be unifying. Celebrating and promoting patriotism in our country is something that should bring everybody together. When it comes to Puerto Rico, the president has sent both Administrator Long and Senior Advisor to the Department of Homeland Security, Tom Bossert, to Puerto Rico today. They're on the ground to assess the damage. We've done unprecedented movement in terms of federal funding to provide for the people of Puerto Rico and others that have been impacted these storms. We'll continue to do so and continue to do everything that we can possibly under the federal government to provide assistance.
So to be very clear, you say the president is instead emphasizing something that brings Americans together. Then what message does it send for the president to stand behind the presidential seal at a rally in Alabama and call an American citizen who's expressing his First Amendment rights a son of a bitch?
Again, I think it's always appropriate for the president to defend our flag, to defend the national anthem. Hold on, I'm not fishing. It's always appropriate for the president of this country to promote our flag, to promote our national anthem, and ask people to respect it.
Promote the
Jeff,
First Amendment.
Peter,
Sarah.
I'll answer your question. Jeff?
Switching topics, Sarah. North Korea's foreign minister said that President Trump had declared war on North Korea and that it reserves the right to take countermeasures, including shooting down U.S. aircraft. Does the White House view President Trump's comments at the UN as a declaration of war?
Not at all. We've not declared war on North Korea, and frankly, the suggestion of that is absurd.
What is the White House's reaction to North Korea's threat to shoot down U.S. aircraft, even if it's not in their airspace?
It's never appropriate for a country to shoot down another country's aircraft when it's over international waters. Our goal is still the same. We continue to seek the peaceful denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. That's our focus. Doing that through both the most maximum economic and diplomatic pressures as possible at this point.
Hey, Sarah, does the president believe that there are very fine people who kneeled yesterday watching those games, or are they all SOBs?
I think you're trying to conflate different things here. Look, we certainly respect the rights that people have, but I think we also need to focus. Again, this isn't about the president being against something, which is what everybody wants to drive. This is about the president being for something. This is about the president being for respect in our country through symbols like the American flag, like the national anthem, and the hundreds of thousands of people that actually stand versus the few hundred that may have knelt.
I want to follow up if I can. The president said that kneeling has nothing to do with race. Colin Kaepernick took to his knees in these games, many of these games, specifically because he said black people in this country were not being treated fairly by police. How is that not an issue of race?
I think that the focus has long since changed, and certainly the message and what a lot has been communicated over these last several weeks through this process, through this protest by these players. Mario.
Sarah, from this podium, you've often expressed some frustration about the media not focusing on the agenda that the president has, substantive issues, things he wants to get done, tax reform, health care, etc. When did the president decide at this rally that he was going to spend so much time talking about the flag itself? And doesn't that distract from the things that you are trying to accomplish this week, whether it's tax reform or health care or the efforts in Puerto Rico or the showdown with North Korea?
Look, I certainly don't think that talking about the American flag is a distraction for the President of the United States. Again, this should be something that every American can get behind and support and celebrate, is national pride in our country, and supporting those that have fought and died to defend it from all different backgrounds. And so I think, again, that is certainly should be a priority of the president. But you act like that's all he did over the weekend. We also did a lot of other things that are continuing to push forward on tax reform, continuing to push forward on health care, continuing to push forward on the safety and security of the border in our country.
He came to the rally with that in mind, though. That was a point. He said, I want to put this in the headlines.
I'm not sure when that decision was made. I wasn't there, but I know that it's a priority for the president to always defend our flag, always defend the national anthem, and certainly to support the men and women in uniform. Mike?
The LA Times report over the weekend that the president was warned by top aides, including McMaster, not to provoke Kim, particularly in the United Nations speech, and that it would because it would potentially backfire.
I'm sorry? I missed the first part of your question. I'm sorry what you said.
The LA Times report that the president was warned not to provoke Kim Jongun in his United Nations speech because that it would potentially backfire, and now we see that they've taken this as a declaration of war.
Sorry. As I've said many times before, I wouldn't use another news source as your source, but and I pushed back on that story at the time, but that's a false narrative. The national security team was involved and engaged throughout the speechwriting process and was very happy with the president's speech at the UN. Go ahead.
Sarah, when Colin Kaepernick says that his protest is about fighting police brutality, fighting racial disparity, racial injustice, you're not taking him at his word. You're saying the focus has long since moved on. But when white supremacists say that their protest is about heritage, not hate, the president does take them at their word. So why is there this disparity about who gets to decide what protest is about?
I think if the debate is really for them about police brutality, they should probably protest the officers on the field that are protecting them instead of the American flag. John Decker.
This is a significant week, a pivotal week for the president, for Republicans. It's an opportunity, some are saying the last best chance for repealing and replacing Obamacare. And yet much of yesterday, the beginning part of today was focused, as far as the president is concerned, on the NFL, on players who take a knee. Can you explain how that's helpful to that effort of repealing and replacing Obamacare when the president spent so much time on that other issue, the issue involving sports?
It really doesn't take that long to type out 140 characters, and this president's very capable of doing more than one thing at a time and more than one thing in a day. John Gizzi.
You see, Sarah, how it's taken up so much oxygen, right? When the president speaks about that particular issue, you see how the majority of questions that have been asked of you so far today have been about this particular
Well, that's
issue.
determined
He has
by
a
you
tremendous, he has a tremendous amount of power when he tweets, and we report on it. And so when he tweets something, it does take away from his legislative agenda. Would you not agree?
No, I don't, because I think that it's important for a president to show patriotism, to be a leader on this issue, and he has. Matthew.
Politico's reported that Secretary Price has been taking private jets for months, and White House Counselor Kellyanne Conway traveled with him to 6 states. So, given that Conway was on some of these trips, one, was the White House aware of Price's travel? And given that he spent more than $400,000 in taxpayer money on private jets just since May, is there any standard for what is and isn't tolerated by this White House when it comes to this kind of conduct?
Yeah, this wasn't White House approved travel. This was done through the general budget at the Department of the Department of HHS. And I think Secretary Price addressed this over the weekend. They're conducting both an internal and an IG review, and all travel on private charter has been suspended until that's completed.
So if I can just follow up on that, if I can get the White House's take now on that travel, since you said it wasn't approved ahead of time. And is it ever appropriate for a cabinet official to spend taxpayer money on private planes? And note I say private planes to differentiate from, say, a military flight for national security purposes.
I think there are certain instances where it probably is, but again, I think that has to be done at a case-by-case basis. I'm not going to give a blanket statement on hypothetical situations that I couldn't possibly be aware of.
Whether or not the White House now, looking back on that, do you approve of that travel?
The White House, again, that travel wouldn't have gone through the White House for approval, and so I couldn't speak to that. Hallie?
I want to follow up here. Will the White House commit to releasing Jared Kushner's private emails related to government business?
I'd have to ask. I'm not aware of that conversation.
Would it seem like Something you would do? I mean, given your commitment to
Again,
transparency.
I'm not going to get ahead of a conversation that hasn't taken place.
Okay. Will you let us know?
Sure.
Great. And then my other question too, I just want to suss out, I think, a question that has been going around here today, because you talk about the president wanting to defend the flag. You know the oath of office was to defend the Constitution. So does the president have a problem with the First Amendment?
Not at all. The president is simply stating that pride in our country is a good thing. It's something that we should all celebrate. It's something that should frankly bring us together, not divide us. Standing up for the national anthem, he feels, is a symbol of that. Jim?
Just
I
support
guess, Sarah.
dissension?
Can I follow up on what Hallie was asking? Why is it that the president over the weekend is going after, or seeming to go after, African-American athletes? And then this morning, he's putting out a tweet praising NASCAR, which obviously is geared towards a different demographic, and the way they stand in respect and honor the flag. Is he trying to wage something of a culture war?
Not at all. The president's not talking about race. The president's talking about pride in our country. What you saw yesterday were players and fans of all races joining together as Americans to honor our service members. That's what the president's talking about. That's what his focus is on. As you guys know, the president's got an event here in a few minutes, so we're going to close there.
Just-
Thanks so much. Have a good day.
It is a cultural reference. You should